Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm interviewing one of my really good friends from my childhood. We went to Mido camps together, Maddie. If you're new to my channel, my name is Isa. I'm a second-year graduate student who's studying communication studies with a focus in disability, culture, and identity. So for the whole month of March, I'm interviewing incredible women doing incredible things in our community, and I wanted to share them with you because they inspire me every day, and so they should inspire you. So Maddie, I'll let you take it away with a small introduction of yourself.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Madison. I am disabled, mentally ill, chronically ill, and neurodivergent. And I'm also a very fierce advocate for the disabled community. And I'm doing advocacy within the city at this point.
Yeah, so um, Maddie did a lot of work with Dallas Pride, and you're also working with the parks, right?
Yes,
Can you tell us a little more about that?
yes. So with Dallas Pride, I was met with some roadblocks of accessibility at the parade. I had emailed the people at the top and asked what the accessibility features were, and they said they didn't have any and that I could go to a bar down the street and watch it on TV. And I said, okay, if you want somebody to come in and talk to you about it and we can make some changes, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to get involved. And they did not reply. So at that point, I went to the sponsors and like the local papers and news stations, just be like, hey, this is happening and I'm being met with roadblocks, and any help with this would be great. And at first, people were like, we'll do what we can, but we don't know what we can do. At this point, they didn't have much say in that kind of stuff. So then I reached out to the Human Rights Campaign and I told them these inaccessibilities that I was facing, and they got in contact with me and connected me with the Oak Lawn United Methodist Church in Dallas, right on the route of the parade. And they said they had a little space that they could set up, and they just wanted to know what accessibility features I felt were the most important. So I said, you know, some water and Gatorade would be great so we can stay hydrated. A place to watch it. So if we need ramps or a pathway or something like that, that would be great. Accessible bathrooms, that kind of thing. And we talked back and forth for a little bit. And then I went to the parade and I got there, and there was a platform set up with a home built ramp, but very sturdy, up to the platform where we had over 16 people come and spend some time to watch the parade with us. We had nurses who had volunteered to be there just in case somebody needed help. We had volunteers who were taking people from the platform to the bathrooms and back. So they had somebody with them at all times. And we had water and Gatorade and accessible bathrooms. And it was so incredible. And we did that for 2 years before they changed the location of the Pride Parade. Um, and so it was so meaningful and so incredible to be able to. There were people there who said they would have already left if it wasn't for that platform. Like before the parade had even started, they were like, oh, we would have left at this point. But they got to stay and watch the parade with us. And then with the Parks Department, I also volunteer with an organization called Bike DFW. And I met a Parks Department board member at one of these events. And I was talking to him about how I was really passionate about accessibility and making sure parks and everything were accessible because I love parks. Parks are one of my favorite places to go. And there are oftentimes I find inaccessibilities along the route. Um, and so he was like, that's my number one priority is accessibility. I want to meet with you and walk around a park, and I want you to talk to me about everything going on that makes it inaccessible. And I was like, incredible. Yes, please. And so sorry. Um we met up at Clyde Warren Park in downtown Dallas, and we walked the entire park. I had my walker slash rollator. And we walked through the entire park, and I got to point out where there were inaccessibilities. And he wrote up a whole thing to present to the Clyde Warren Park executives and things like that, the higher ups essentially. And they immediately started making changes and were starting projects on there were a couple places on the path that were not accessible, and they already said they were working on it, and there was holiday stuff going on, and so they rearranged some of that to make it more accessible. It was so incredible. It was immediate action, and it made me so happy because I could go and enjoy the holiday experience at Clyde Warren at that point.
That's incredible. I just think you're so cool. And seeing that immediate action, I think I remember because I worked in the advancement office of my undergrad university, and I think I remember reading from the Dallas newspaper something about the work that you were doing with Dallas Pride, and it was like, I
Yes.
know, it's
Yeah,
so cool.
it was the front page story for Pride that year, that first year. And we went and bought like 3 or 4 of them just to have them for keepsakes, because it was so incredible to be able to read in the paper that people noticed and people care, and it was incredible. My grandma had messaged me, and she was like, hey, I think I noticed somebody's name in the paper today. And I was like, what? And I went and read, and I had been interviewed that day at Pride, but they weren't sure if it was going to make the paper or not. And so to wake up that next morning and see that it was the front page article for it, I was like, so worth all, because it took a few months to finally get to the Human Rights Campaign and get that email and that process going. And so to see that all that hard work that I had gone through, emailing and messaging as many people and organizations as I could find, it was so great to see that it was a meaningful experience, not just for me, but for everyone involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I think you're so cool. So how did you get started in all of the disability advocacy you do? Not just, the in-person stuff, but also online.
Yeah, so I have always been, me and my family are very passionate volunteers. We love to volunteer. And so I've gotten into some additional advocacies beyond disability in my life because of all the volunteering I've been a part of. And when I had found out that Pride was not accessible, I immediately went, this is not okay. I need to make this okay for not just me who wants to go to Pride and have fun, but it's important for a lot of other people. And so I was able to advocate and heighten the voices of not just myself, but of all disabled people at that point. And I went on my Twitter and asked for suggestions of additional accessibility features you may want to see it at a Pride parade. And so I hadn't really fully realized that the advocating I had been doing online was advocating. It had not fully processed in my head that that's what I was doing. And so when I was able to do this advocating for Pride, I was so encouraged, and I decided at that moment that I wanted to do more of this and do more advocating. And so that's when I started reaching out and talking more on my social media and doing things, new volunteer experiences, things like that. Um, I was able to do all those things and have just um, built my skill set and my skill level on those certain things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really cool about something you said is that it doesn't just affect me. And I think so many times when we advocate for ourselves, the response, at least that I've gotten, is we can't just do that for one person.
Yeah.
And having that like power behind you and kind of realization that it's not ever just about one person.
Yeah.
It's never just about my advocacy for my needs. It's about, if you're not letting me have access to things, you're not letting all of us have access to things.
Um, I'm diagnosed with mitochondrial disease. Um, and I have done multiple types of genetic testing to try to get that diagnosis. And eventually we did get that diagnosis by blood test, but then there was the whole exome sequencing test you can do. And I decided almost immediately, I was like, I want to get that done, because if I can get the correct diagnoses and the correct information, it makes the next person in line get an easier diagnosis. It furthers research. It creates trials, like drug trials and things like that. And we actually did find an additional gene that could be affecting us. And by the way, us, I mean my brother, my sister, and me. We all have we have a maternally inherited mitochondrial disease. And so if the next person who has that condition, that diagnosis, they may get it easier because they were able to recognize on my gene profile that I had that dysfunction in that gene. And so that's always been my mindset when it comes to additional testing and additional doctors. It's like, well, if I can get that help, if I can get that diagnosis, it'll make it easier for the next person. And that's the most important thing to me, is I don't want anybody else to go through the trials that I went through. So if they can get a diagnosis through blood instead of having to get a muscle biopsy, great. I would much prefer another person not have to get a muscle biopsy. And so I've always been in a big mindset of, it's not just me. There's a lot of people out there who need that information and those accessibility features. And it's a very important mindset to me, is like, I can't just be thinking of myself during these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an idea that motivates and pushes me in the work that I try to do. That, because sometimes it's easier to give up on yourself, I think, than it is
Yeah.
to give up on your community.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what has been one of the most challenging moments that you've had and that you've kind of taken on?
Well, I would definitely say, of things that I've had to take on, but ultimately got a good result, or a great result, really, would be Pride. That took months of time and like goal sets and that kind of thing. Um, and it took a lot of contacting people and a bunch of different kinds of people trying to get what ultimately was one of the best accessibility features I've ever seen.
Yeah. I'm still so sad. I never got to make it to Dallas Pride, right when I was like starting to be able to explore Pride things was 2019 and
Yeah,
then COVID. So,
yeah. I'm hoping because they changed locations for the past couple of years,
mhm.
or this year, last year, they took off 2020 because of COVID, but in 2021 they had like a concert instead of a parade. And so I'm hopeful they'll go back to doing the parade again because I love the parade.
The parade just sounds like so much fun.
It is. It's so upbeat, and the people around us who were, because we were basically in this little garden area that was fenced off. The
Mhm.
people who were over by the street would get beads and cups and like little stress balls and things like that, and they would bring them over to us and be like, hey, what of this do you want, because they couldn't get the stuff, they couldn't throw the stuff far enough to reach us.
Mhm.
So these people would bring them over and be like, hey, we got a couple extra things, what do you want? And it was really awesome to see that community together.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of leads us to the next question. So, what's been one of the most rewarding moments as a disability advocate?
Definitely pride in talking to the parks board member. The parks board member is passionate and excited and new to the board. And so he still has a lot of that passion and excitement when it comes to new things and doing things differently. And accessibility is one of his main priorities. And so when I got to walk him around Clyde Warren, he started noticing things before I immediately noticed things. And he was like, hey, would that be an accessibility? And I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. That's dangerous. And like, it was incredible to see his eyes open up and him be able to see the things that made it accessible and immediately want to change those things and make the parks better.
Absolutely. And I think it's so encouraging that people like that exist because I
Yeah,
know sometimes, at least for me, that wanting to advocate for change or something, it's hard when, especially during COVID and stuff, and then everything's just kind of been sad and hard and it feels difficult
yeah.
that people want to help, they want to learn, they want to grow and make things better.
That's that's the most important thing in my mind, is like, even if they didn't notice it immediately, because some some non-disabled people don't notice where something might be inaccessible. They hopefully don't do it maliciously, but it they just, their eyes aren't open to those kinds of things at that point. And so to see his eyes open to those things when, and suddenly be able to talk to me about it and want to change it, it was so exciting. And it was like, okay, he wants to help, he wants to make a difference, let's do it, like let's get into this and do it well and do it how it needs to be done. So I wasn't just talking about inaccessibilities for somebody in a wheelchair, I was also talking about inaccessibilities for somebody with a cane or a walker, or who's blind or deaf, or um has a chronic illness and needs to be able to sit down in a comfortable seat. If maybe they can walk some distance, but not a lot of distance, they need to have a nice, comfortable seat to sit on. And so I got to talk to him about that. Some of the seating at Clyde Warren is not very plus size friendly, and I am plus size. And so I was like, those aren't steady for somebody who's plus size and needs to sit down. And he was like, that you're completely right. This needs to change. It was great to be able to talk not just about my own things that I've dealt with. I also coordinated with other people, other disabled people that I know personally. I was just like, hey, if you have time for a question, please let me know. I have something very important happening and I want your input. And so they all got back to me, and I was like, I'm about to meet with this Perks board member, and I want to be able to represent not just my own inaccessibilities. I want to represent everyone's. And so I was able to actually write up a whole list of accessibility features that should be prominent in a park and things to consider going forward. So like accessibilities included toilets and changing tables that were made for adults and children, and sinks at a certain height. And the things to consider, I put down having a committee of disabled people come in and talk about and make these changes more present, and creating a fund for accessibility updates. And so those were kind of a few things I did to make it so this can really stick. And he can take that list I gave him and take it to anybody he wants and be like, this is what we need. And that was really important. And he said it was gold. I mentioned something about it. He was like, this is gold. And I was like, great. I'm so excited. I'm so glad you think that, because that's gold to us. That's accessibility is what we have to have. And knowing that you feel the same way is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said also about the committee, having a committee of disabled people. I remember reading an article about this road that they wanted to check was accessible. And instead of talking to disabled people, they made their engineers get in wheelchairs and go across the street. And I was like, you could have paid disabled people to just exist as disabled people.
You could have just paid a disabled person. They could have come out there and told you, because that's so much more what we need than them trying to create something weird and offhanded like that.
And it's probably more expensive that way. You're not even going to be fully accessible because you're not considering all accessibility needs.
Yeah.
Crazy. So then also, what advice would you give yourself when you were 16 to 18?
I would say keep doing what you're doing, because you're making a change.
It's really important. So those are all of my questions. I guess the final question is, how can viewers find you if they want to follow you and your amazing journey and your content and all of that stuff?
Thank you. Anyone can find me on Twitter, Instagram, all those places, TikTok, everywhere essentially, at Madisai, MADISIGHH.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, viewers, for being here and watching these interviews. I'm very excited about this series. I think it's amazing. It's so cool to see what all of these incredible people are doing, and I definitely want to make it as visible as possible. So if you like this content, make sure to like and subscribe and all of that good stuff, and I'll see you real soon. Okay.